Shidduchim podcast.
Looks like it is recording. Good. Should be fine.
Okay. Left, right. There we go. Ready?
Good to go.
I want to get the main topic sheet because I don't have that.
Yeah, let me pull that up also.
That was on my email.
It's actually good. The camera's not going to even see that I'm looking at my phone.
Exactly. It's okay. I've done it on dates. It's fine. Just kidding. No, I haven't. All right. Now let me move over here a little bit because I really need to bring back the cranes for this. The what you call it? Not the cranes. The
hanging mic.
The mic stand. Yeah, these are terrible.
Should I turn this off so it doesn't get on the mic?
Yeah. You can turn that off. It's gonna get a little hot, but.
Where's the thing that you? Oh, it just did it itself. Is there a?
On, off, maybe? That button?
Is that a button?
Try.
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Didn't realize it was a button. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Plug this in. Do it.
Okay, so this is another episode of the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast, and this is Avery hosting solo this episode. If you're listening, I've heard that the fans like it a lot better this way, so you're out. It is what it is. But this week's episode is about something I think that is actually like one of the most important things in Shidduchim, if not the most important thing. It's something that once you get told about this topic, it is more important than somebody's personality, what they look like. It's about what we are trying to present in terms of hashkafos. How to figure out what the right or proper hashkafa is and what actually it matters in terms of hashkafa. And for this week's episode, we brought on a couple of experts. They're married to each other, so their hashkafa hopefully is pretty similar to each other, and they can give us a lot.
I don't know about that.
You make it sound like we've never been here before, Avery.
That's true, I know. But I'd like to introduce Yona and Chani, who are a married couple.
Insert clapping
I
sound
don't know
here.
about that was referring to our hashkafic similarity all the time. Not that we're married.
Yeah,
That I
that's
do
true.
know.
That we certainly are.
Well, marriage is similar, but the hashkafa part.
I mean, we're similar. Hashkafa.
Similar
We were-
enough. Similar
You
enough.
think we're that different? I don't think so.
Hold
not
that.
dressed. Not dressed.
Hold that
we'll
thought.
Get to
We'll
it,
get
yeah.
to it. We'll get to it once we get to
On the
after
Yona
our
and
topic
Chani
list.
show.
after we take a short break to thank our sponsors. Okay, we're back on the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast here again with Yona and Chani. And like I said, we're going to dispel some of the notions about hashkafas that we think are actually taking people away from actually finding their true match and spouse because they're stuck in these rigid, ridiculous, thoughtless, archaic notions that they have to have a certain type of person who only, like for example, will not listen to, non-Jewish music, not go to concerts, not have a TV in the house. And, I wanted to get your opinion. We'll start with Yona about maybe let's start with the TV and how important things like that are and why they take away from like the main factors of what you're trying to do in a marriage.
Well, you're assuming that I agree with you that they take
I don't
away
know.
from the main
I guess we'll
factors.
find out.
Ah. No, so, I mean, my opinion in general on these sorts of things, I think I would say in general, it's going to come down to how is it going to affect your relationship and how is it going to affect your life? Meaning, something like TV, for example.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I think it could be a very big deal, because if you're somebody who, who specifically does, let's say you don't want a TV in the house because you don't want your kids to be influenced by the TV, because you yourself are trying to be very careful about the TV. So I would say, I think that it's very reasonable. In fact, it's responsible to make that a criteria, to make that, to say up front, listen, I don't want a TV in the house, because the fact is you could be dating someone who is the exact opposite, who loves TV, who's a serial TV watcher, and would go nuts without having TV. So in my opinion, that's something that it could be a big deal. It could be, it's not such a big deal. It really depends where you're holding, what your reasoning is. And I would say as well that, for example, so again, using the example of TV. So let's say you try not to watch TV, or to, stay on the low side, the low end of watching TV. Every once in a while you do, maybe.
Right. Just the Super Bowl.
Just the Super Bowl, exactly. Not like I watched the Super Bowl, but it was always for the commercials and for the food. So, but what I would say is, like, there could be room for some sort of leniency, in the sense that if you're not, if you're somebody who sometimes does watch and you enjoy it, you don't want it in the house. You don't want it to be around your kids. You don't want your kids to have access to it. You don't want it to be something that's like a constant go-to. So then you might come up with some sort of a compromise position where it's like,
right,
you do you. I'm going to try to avoid watching TV. If you want to watch on your computer, you want to watch your TV shows, gesundheit, like, enjoy.
You don't believe that there's a fine line, say this to this person, he's extremely rigid, like no TV in the house, and if they get me somebody, if a shotgun sends me somebody who will actually watch TV every so often, the shidduch is off. You don't believe in that?
I don't believe in it as a general rule, but I wouldn't say I don't believe in it, because I think that it depends where you're holding. If you're talking to a guy who's been learning in Kollel for, he's been learning in yeshiva for the past 5 years, and he's super, super frum, and TV is like, is something that he has zero shaykhs to whatsoever,
right.
or even if he used to and he's gotten so far beyond that, then, why should he have to compromise on that? In that case, I would say, well, maybe that guy or girl, a girl who's looking for someone who's really serious about his Yiddishkeit, who wants to really, grow and not have these sort of outside influences. For somebody like that, then absolutely there should be a standard where, if they feel like TV is absolutely out of the question, sometimes it does make sense, but you have to know yourself. You can't be, I think you can't be rigid when you don't have, like, I feel like certain people have the right to be rigid and some people don't have the right. Like, you're not holding there yourself. So don't be super rigid about it. If you're somebody who sometimes watches TV shows on online, then don't say that you're going to get married and then, like, that's it, we're going to go cold turkey, never ever watch a TV show again.
Right.
Hey, we won't have it in the house. We'll watch it online sometimes.
Right. We'll go to Bubby and Zadie.
We'll go on Bubby and Zadie. Exactly.
They got to be good for something.
Right.
Exactly.
Look, back in the day, it was Marvelous Meadows Machine. That was the only thing that was entertaining to watch. Instead of The Simpsons, I'd watch Marvelous Meadows Machine.
Dr. Meadows.
Exactly. That was back then. But Chani, what's your take on that?
So I would say, Yona, I wouldn't say necessarily that certain people don't deserve to ask that.
I was being extreme with that, but
okay.
Right, but I definitely agree that people should be self-aware. What I would say is also, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to think long-term, like, what kind of effect is this going to have on my future? I get it. Obviously you're trying to build your future now, but it can be a little hard to, know the specifics of how one little aspect of your life is going to play out. But I would say one thing that might be good to do is to really think, like, what kind of impact does this have on my life now? Meaning my decision to watch or not watch TV. Why do I do or not do that? And what's it doing to my life? If somebody consciously chose not to have that as a part of their life because, they're a better person without it, they're a more productive person without it, they're a more spiritual person without it, I definitely think that's a very valid reason. And if it's just something that you've always done or not done but never really thought about why or why not, like, really take that time to think. You'll learn so much about yourself.
Interesting.
And
It's funny, Connie, because like people in our community, they love to put other people in a specific box because we have so much Jewish anxiety and so much Jewish guilt that if they're not in that box and they go out with us and they're not in our circle, there's an issue. I think to like...
That's a whole Pandora's box right there.
Yeah, it is. But I think back to, I used to be on Twitter a lot, all the time. I used to spend a lot of time on Twitter. The most yeshivish, greasy Lakewood guys would be on Twitter all day talking about Trump, talking about politics, coronavirus during the election. All they would talk about was that, and then they would go back to learning in Lakewood. So the idea that they are, and I'm a person who doesn't really watch TV much. I don't have time for it. So the idea that they're so much more, yeshivish or,
well, yeshivish is a whole,
they're more
that's a
sheltered in some ways. And it's insane. Some people, just as I am not, the biggest person involved in, let's say, secular stuff, just as I'm not so involved in secular movies and media or whatever it is, doesn't mean that there's not some other trigger for people. But I don't know. I just find that funny.
Like my cousin Yossi, whose tweet was on Tim Pool's podcast, but he himself doesn't know what a podcast is.
Yeah, Tim Pool quoted her cousin's. You heard of Tim Pool?
Who is he again?
He's
this
grifter.
He's a
grifter.
He's like he's actually really interesting. He's like a liberal guy, but he's not into like this woke leftism. So he's like he like doesn't really even consider himself a liberal anymore because like he's sort of like a libertarian,
right?
And he has very interesting views on things. And he he went from being like anti-Trump to being like, yeah, I'm voting Trump like next time around.
Wow.
And he actually quoted, I was randomly listening to the show and all of a sudden I hear, I'm not going to say the last name, but they're like a family that Chani is related to all of them. And he says, so this is a tweet from Yossi, whatever the last name. He's like, oh my gosh, Chani, your cousin's on the show.
He's living in Lakewood. I'm sure he has no idea what a podcast is.
No, but now maybe he'll listen to that one and this one.
But is he yeshivish or not? I mean, he's on Twitter all day. Twitter. He seems to know all about Trump.
Right.
But he doesn't know what a podcast is.
Right. And the hashkafos have shifted in our culture. Like, there was never an Instagram and there was never Pinterest and the various media consuming, for me on my stock market, money making, but whatever, not the point. There was never these things as like outlets. It was just, you had a TV, you had your radio, you had music, and that was it. And Instagram, TikTok for the kids and for the now yeshivish communities, they're just as involved in these things. There are various, yeshivish, quote unquote, let's call it, we'll get into the black hat subject in a minute, but the black hat type of communities who are all over Instagram and all over our podcast, and they listen to it. Right. And it's something they wouldn't have done 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Listen, the world is definitely changing. And I think Hashkafa in general has taken on, it's what do you mean by Hashkafa? What, and yeshivas, if you're talking about yeshivish, for example, so there's the yeshivish where like, the guys are in kollel and their minds are only on learning and but then there's yeshivish where like, it's a cultural thing. They talk a certain way. They dress a certain way. They do, they are involved in learning to some degree, but then they, they get very involved in culture as well. And so what are they? Are they yeshivish? Are they not? It's an interesting question. It's, I think yeshivish has sort of taken on this like cultural, as opposed to necessarily a hashkafic thing. Some of the people who are, who would consider themselves yeshivish, they're considering themselves yeshivish because they identify culturally. Right. They, and it's interesting because then, then there's the other ones who really, it really is a hashkafic thing for them. And, they're probably more towards what yeshivish once was. Right. And it's sort of evolving over time. It's interesting. I feel like the boxes they're in some ways very useful, and then in other ways they are just
in today's day and age, you can throw them out the window. It's just there's no such thing anymore.
I would push back a little bit. I hear the point. I don't think that you can completely throw them out the window. I think they're useful in the sense that there is a certain whereas maybe once upon a time there was, and I don't even know if this is true, but maybe once upon a time there were more defined like what each of these things mean. they, now it's sort of like everything just sort of mushes into each other, but there still is a core, meaning when I was dating, I didn't know, like, I don't consider myself modern Orthodox. I don't consider myself yeshivish. So then there's modern Orthodox machmir, or there's modern yeshivish. Which one of those do I fall under? Well, I don't know. I'm uncomfortable calling myself either of those. Yeah. So, but the point
you wear
is,
a black hat, but you also wear a gray hat and a blue hat and a green hat and
So
every color of the rainbow hat.
You could just be non-binary.
Non-binary, exactly. But my point is, like, so when I was dating, I was open to girls who would consider themselves, modern yeshivish. I was also open to some girls who consider themselves modern Orthodox machmir, because there's a certain general, like, okay, I know that if they're in those categories, they're somewhat in the right ballpark. Whereas if somebody said that they're modern Orthodox, or if somebody said that they're, that they're yeshivish, I would know, like, that person is not for me.
Right.
Because that's already too far outside of my general umbrella.
Yeah.
That I know. So I think in that respect, it can be useful. But other than that, you have to sort of broaden your horizons a bit. You can't be too rigid. You can't stick yourself too much in the box and demand, I want someone in my same box. Like, the box doesn't really mean very much.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think we're in a similar hashkafic phase. Our level of frumkeit may be different in some certain areas, but in the same type of girls that we have gone out with in the past and went, dated, we probably had that similar, like, oh man, if they're super, Zioni, I don't know if that's really for me. That doesn't really fit.
Right.
But if they're going to enforce that I wear a black hat and fit into the box of what the box looks like, for lack of better terms, let's say like the Flatbush community, your standard person will go, to the mirror, then come back from the mirror, they wouldn't go, to Israel first year. They would go after a couple years of staying home. So like, if you want us to fit into that box, no, we don't really fit that box.
Right.
Connie, like, you have something to say.
I'm trying to think which of Yona's points to tag along with, because I agreed with pretty much all of them. I would say that what you had said with regards to viewing, like, with specifically the yeshivish community, whether you view it as, the place where you belong, or actually a matter of hashkafa. Like, as a girl, I don't know that I really cared about this so much. I didn't really even notice for the most part, honestly. But when I was dating, there was a lot of talk about, do you care about the black hat? Do you not care about the black hat? If he wears a black hat sometimes, if he used to and now he doesn't, the extent to which people care about that. I think, for some people, it really is an indication of how from they are. And I haven't honestly quite figured out how that works, because a black hat is pretty new within the last few decades. Like, back in Europe, there were no black felt fedoras, I don't think. At least not as prevalent as
not
they
in
are
the pictures.
Now. Right? They were all wearing fishermen's caps.
Somewhere.
But for some people, as much as, people might give them flack for it, you're being ridiculous, it's just a hat, it really is a sign of the community that they identify with. And as small as it may be, not having that feels like they're kind of like leaving their community or joining a different one. And if that's not something that they're comfortable with, then they'll say no on the basis of that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand it. I really understand it.
But that's where I would say, as I said before, to be careful not to box yourself in too much, because I think that is a problem. I think that I understand where they're coming from, that it feels different, it feels weird, it feels wrong. But when you actually think about it, the black hat is really not a matter of halacha. It's really, I think that it's important when it comes to, how you're going to raise your kids in terms of halacha, and how you're going to live your lives together. Are you on the same page in terms of your avodas Hashem? But I think it's a big problem that people consider the hat to be avodas Hashem. Right. Listen, I wear hats. They're not all, as Chani mentioned, they're not all black. But like, I wear hats because I chose to do so. But like, the point is that, like, I don't look down at people who don't wear hats. Like, it's a choice, and in some communities it may be less of a choice than others. But when you really think about it, if the person is in every other way on the right, really just makes sense for you, but you're gonna shoot it down because they don't wear a hat. I mean, I've seen these things happen, and I've seen very unfortunate things.
The contention will be that when you send your children to yeshiva 10 years, 15 years down the line, you want your child going to yeshiva, prominent yeshiva, where they will be wearing hats. They will be wearing white shirts. I would think the vast majority of people in Shidduchim probably don't really know what type of yeshiva that they want to send their kids to. I think they may have an idea.
They're from out of town, so something like that would like never even occur to them.
That's true. If you I'm looking from a 5 towns perspective where you have all the array of options and menus of the various yeshivas to rip you off and take your money. But
oh gosh, that's
another topic. Yeah, you can. Yeah, my parents could settle that outside of the podcast studio, but I really think that it's important for the kids, to develop their own culture, let alone what the parents decide, right? Don't we say treat your kid as an individual, whatever they are, let them choose their path in some ways, not fully. If a kid doesn't want to wear a black hat, and I will thank my parents for this, after 3 weeks after my bar mitzvah, I'm like, yeah, you know what? This black hat, it looked good in the pictures. It's not for me. I'm not doing it. I don't really care, and of course the grandparents like, oi, he's never going to get a shit off. He's a guy. Just change his name to Johnson, while you're at it. Literally. And I don't know, it didn't, the type of people that I put myself around and hang out with are not those type of people. I do have friends that are firmer as well, but they're firmer with like an open-minded, black hat shouldn't be associated with firmer, but they're not black hat per se, strict type of people. So
that's kind of like what I was saying before, like really choosing what it is that you're going to be doing and not be doing. And, anything that you have been doing your whole life, like let's say someone who just put that black hat on and never thought about it again. It goes on Friday night, comes off Motzei Shabbos, and, no further thought. If that's something that you really, really care about, like just think about why. And if it's, I don't know, this is what I've always done and this is what I'm comfortable with, like, okay, so clearly it's not necessarily reflective of somebody's inner character or the work that they have or haven't done. I get very triggered by doing the work these days.
Oh, gosh.
That's a big one.
But before it became an evil term.
We should change the term from doing the work to...
self-improvement.
So not self-improvement, to everybody else stinks and I'm better.
Oh.
That should be it. That should be the way we think. No.
Makes sense.
The therapy books would not agree with that. But I'll start my own brand of therapy. Like move Freud over.
I hear.
Get him out there. Yeah.
I hear.
No, but I agree. I agree with you. That's a valid contention. I don't know. I think about how I raise my children. One thing I guess maybe from my upbringing or from the yeshivas I went to, I have a bit of an issue with, and I don't understand why, is the modern Orthodox young Israel style of, let's say, davening or community. I don't even know where it comes from. It's this like inner stereotype that's in my head, which I'm still trying to like drill out. Maybe it's from the yeshivas I went to. Yona and I basically went to the same yeshivas, so like he can explain it to me. I don't know where it comes from. But I remember the Rebbeim would say, "Oi, the young Israel, they're davening Hallel, on Yom Ha'atzmaut. How dare they?
I never experienced that in yeshiva. I don't. Maybe in elementary school you had it. I don't know.
No. They were. I mean, they were
school?
Racist. I mean, there was more stuff going on. Yeah.
I totally,
high school.
Totally disagree.
I don't know. I was in.
Maybe in elementary school you had.
I'm not going to say the Rebbe's name, but.
In my
and then Israel especially. We went to different yeshivas in Israel. So
right, yeah. In Israel, I can't speak to your Israel experience. I can't speak to any of your experiences, but all I know is that in high school, which we did go to the same high school, I found the Rebbeim to be very not like that.
I don't know. Maybe because I grew up a bit more, I guess, if someone would quote it, hashkafically to the right. The shuls I davened in were, I would say, hashkafically to the right.
Right.
More Hasidish, if you want to put a term on it.
Heimish,
in some ways.
Like Heimish light.
Yeah. People wear black hats, but they go to Kiddush at 10:30 and then instead of like 12 o'clock at a formal American Kiddush with a Thanksgiving dinner and their uncles and aunts like they do in the Young Israels. So I guess that would be the difference, right? And that wouldn't stand in the Young Israel. Young Israels, they don't have alcohol. So like there are certain...
They don't?
What?
A lot of them don't allow. Young Israel Woodmere does not allow any alcohol
Wow.
Oh,
I
wow.
in
never
their
heard
in their
of
place.
that.
Yeah, legit.
Definitely
living
not.
in prohibition. My
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, I'm sorry for putting that on the air, but there goes half their membership.
Listen, I agree with you that that's a thing that can happen when based on how you grew up. Like I also used to sort of have that, and even to some degree, I probably still do. Where like I grew up similar, sort of, middle of the road,
Right.
leaning a little more right wing Heimish, and I used to have that a lot more, where it was like, I would sort of like think like, oh, young Israel, that's a whole different world. It's a whole, and I don't know, as I got older, the more exposure I had to things, I realized we're not as different as we think. Really not. Like, yeah, okay, the davening's a little different. I've come to like certain parts of that type of davening, actually. Like, for example, like the like Eitz Chaim before stuff. I love that. Like, I happen to absolutely love that, and I do that when I daven for the Amud. Like,
That's funny.
But I've come to realize that these things are so superficial. Some of it, like sometimes there are some real things where it's like real, serious differences in terms of your outlook, in terms of your hashkafic outlook. But like in terms of the way you daven, the way you pronounce the stuff or the tough,
Yeah.
Does that really make a difference? I knew it's interesting. I was
Disclaimer: it wouldn't make a difference in my Shidduchim anymore. Like I don't really think of it. Like if somebody davens the young Israel, it's not a big deal. Like,
right, but I get that. I get that feeling. I
it's
also
just
used to
there.
have that. Like I used to have that
You're an
same sort of,
imposter.
and it wasn't, the truth is, like as I said, it wasn't something I was ever taught. I found my rebbeim to be very open minded overall, even if they weren't young Israel type at all. But I found them to be very accepting and very open minded, and I was never taught that. It wasn't like I don't want it to be like, oh, this is what happens when, like, I don't think this is something that came from my schooling. I think it's just sort of I think that people have a tendency to box themselves. People have a tendency to look at other groups and say, oh, this group is different. This group does things wrong. This group, like everything, our way is the right way. And I think it's a self-imposed thing. Sometimes it is a communal thing, but I think that that's because the community individually, everybody sort of self-imposes it, and then they reinforce it, and then their kids learn it. So I think that even if you're not taught it explicitly, if you're not exposed to it so much, it becomes weird. It becomes like, oh, that they're different. But I actually heard this on a podcast recently. I don't remember which podcast it was and which episode it was, but I remember. It was the 1840 podcast. Great podcast, by the way. Fantastic. I highly recommend it. Really, his name was Rabbi Bashevkin, and he's like a YU rabbi, and he has really just interesting guests, really interesting topics. He's very, very, very interesting. He doesn't shy away from difficult topics, stuff like that.
Just know that free plug wouldn't have happened if I was here.
No, I'm bringing it up because he mentioned, he had someone on the show who mentioned, I think it was on his show. Someone mentioned, and if it wasn't on the show, then I feel like an idiot. It was somewhere that I heard this, that they went to they had a choice between two yeshivas, and one of them was like I don't know, like Hotel, and the other one was like Base or something like that, something along those lines. And like he ended up going to let's say it was Base, and he said, if I would have gone to Hotel, it would have been an amazing experience, and I would have been a very similar person to who I am today, because people put too much stock in our differences, but these places are really not that different. They might have certain emphases they might emphasize certain things a little bit more than others, but at the end of the day, their core values are the same. One might emphasize halacha more, and the other one might emphasize Gemara more, but they all learn Gemara and they all learn halacha.
Are you saying Israel's all a scam? Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't quite put it like that. No, no. I'm saying that we're not as different as the people box. There's too many dividers between us as a people, and there are significant differences between certain things. But like, you're really going to tell me that there's huge differences between modern Orthodox Machmir and modern Yeshivish? No, and even Yeshivish and modern Orthodox Machmir, there's differences in terms of their approach. There's differences in terms of certain outlook things, and there are certain core differences, but it's really minimal. Overall, they care about halacha, they care about learning Torah, they care about living, as from Jews, and they approach it a little bit differently, but they learn the same things. They, we're really the same. We're not that different.
Chani, you grew up out of town. So
Yeah.
I'm curious if you grew up probably more open-minded than we did, but like what was the mentality?
Definitely more open-minded, but at the same time, you only know from what you've actually been exposed to. And while there might be a broader range out of town, at the end of the day, everyone is representative mostly of themselves. Like if you would compare mine and Yona's upbringing, I would venture to say that mine might have been a little more right-wing in terms of like the things that I was or wasn't allowed to do. But in my specific community, I was definitely not viewed as part of the yeshivish crew at all. But it's just the dynamics of the community there. I'm like trying to think of an example that I see around here. Like, I feel like in my community, going to a Beis Yaakov seminary was viewed as like a superior thing than going to a seminary that didn't identify as Beis Yaakov, which I always kind of struggled with because, you go to a seminary that you feel is a good match for you, whatever it is, it's supposed to be a year of growth for everyone. So because they tack the words Beis Yaakov before their girl's name and another Hebrew word that are all seminaries, like how is it any different? And then I came here and there really wasn't a difference. I don't feel like girls who went to a Beis Yaakov seminary for 10 months of their life are then put on a pedestal that other people don't get to be on. And like that's just one very, very small example. But every community kind of creates that. So
I hear you mean Queens, right?
Yeah.
Because Queens is awesome.
Queens is pretty
great
awesome.
Community.
Yeah. But yeah, I love out of town though. It's fantastic.
Yeah, look, the out of town mentality. There are people who like would be considered like modern Orthodox there and like extremely modern Orthodox, but they would accept people from the frum community that overall they're just more accepting people.
I would say that
typically.
Like one thing that again, like Queens is so similar to out of town. Like you see this there too, but in Chicago where I grew up, I've been in shul so many times. My parents daven in like a more young Israel type of shul, but I've seen, kollel guys come in there to catch davening and, not like standing in the corner feeling like this is a b'diavad and it's really not an ideal davening. No, they join in like everyone else. But in Queens, they do that too.
Yes,
so,
very much so.
Yeah. See, it would be really intimidating for like a guy like me to go out with a girl from Lakewood. Like, let's say I get a resume and they live in Lakewood. I don't care what the girl is like necessarily. Already, I'm starting off with the notion and the idea, like the concept of they live in Lakewood. They probably go to a very yeshivish place. Even though I know in Lakewood there are people that are not necessarily
for sure
extremely, yeshivish. And there may be people that may fit, my bracket in terms of dating. But, it gives me a bit of a pause. Just to start.
I get that.
Yeah.
And listen, I dated at least one or two Lakewood girls.
And the tolls.
The drive at night is dreadful.
Yeah.
The drive at night, like I was terrified driving home after that date. It was I was so exhausted. But like, I went out, at least one girl that I dated from Lakewood was more modern than me.
Wow.
And it's definitely like, there definitely are people who are either more modern or somewhere in the middle, whatever. But I get that because the overall vibe of the community is going to be a lot more yeshivish. But I think that now we're getting into the territory of, can different backgrounds mix? Can you mix with someone who's not in your box in terms of their cultural experience, but maybe in terms of their core values, they are.
Right.
So that's sort of melding that's like what we were talking about before. There's like cultural yeshivish, and then there's actual like hashkafic yeshivish. Right. So like I feel like it's similar to that in the sense that you could have someone who may come from a place that's more, let's say, culturally yeshivish than yours, or even hashkafically yeshivish than yours, but they're more more maybe culturally yeshivish, but in terms of their core values, they're they're very similar to you, and they're in touch with the the outside world. They have social media, and they're working and all that, and they're in terms of their daily life and the things that they do and their interests, they're very similar to you. But their family is more yeshivish, and their shul is more yeshivish.
Here's the prime example, and I've been called for references for a number of friends. Actually, the prime example is, does the mother cover her hair? Right. This is the one. This always comes back. Does the mother cover her hair? And some people ask, I have a friend whose mother, I don't know if she covered her hair with a sheitel. She would wear like a hat or something generally, but she never really wore a sheitel. They were more modern and, than I guess they're more modern Orthodox type. And he was a lot more, yeshiva. She was learning and looking to learn for many years. So people would call me and they'd be like really concerned, like, well, the mother does not cover her hair. I don't know. Like, how am I supposed to think about that? They'd be like, well, they're just as frum as you are. They go to minyan 3 times a day. They keep all halachos, probably more than I do. And my mother covers her hair. So, like I said, each person can choose on their own. But that is one of the prime examples, covering their hair. Because many couples will say, oh, the mother doesn't cover their hair. I don't want my kids to grow up around that. Right. I've heard that many times. Some of them, it's because of the, being judged about their friends. Some of them on like an actual, halachic basis, I guess. That's what they feel.
I guess on a much more extreme note, just in terms of like diversity, I work with a lot of Hasidic clients. And, kind of discovering, we all go in knowing that we're going to be very different. I go by an English name at work. I wear a sheitel, a longer one than any that would be acceptable in their communities. So we go in knowing that we're going to be very different. But as we slowly learn our similarities, like you really see, we're really so much more similar than we're different. Like slowly they realize, yes, I have a kid. I also have to cook for Shabbos. I also struggle to get my potato kugel to come out right. And, you also value exercise and cleanliness and teaching your kids to eat healthy. Like, I feel like the more you actually take the time to get to know people, the more you realize. I'm not saying that necessarily the Hasidic community should just merge with everyone else and we should all marry each other and who cares about our lifestyle differences. But just recognizing that people really do have so much more in common than not.
And I feel like you could apply that to the sort of middle areas, meaning
Definitely.
I can be
even
so
more
similar.
So.
Right, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Like if I can find myself, relating to a Hasidic person on such a strong level, and like, wow, we really are pretty similar, then maybe a Hasidic person isn't for you and me, but in terms of marriage, but maybe that should open my eyes to the fact that someone who's from a little more of a Heimish background than me, but is themselves kind of similar to me, maybe that should give you something to think about. That if I can be so similar to someone who's supposed to be so different from me,
right?
I can really connect with someone who's not really that far away.
Yeah, but Yona, I disagree with that somewhat. When we're talking about Shidduchim, you do want somebody who has a similar background when you're dating them. It makes things somewhat easier.
Oh, definitely.
It makes things so much easier. Have you heard of, we both know people who've married, from Sephardi to Ashkenaz and from, like modern to extremely yeshivish. And there are bridges that are harder to cross, along with the other stuff that come from marrying, from being in, actually in a relationship between man and woman. That's already a difficult proposition to make. It's not easy to be in a relationship, and it's not easy to make the relationship work, let alone those other barriers that your culture does this. How are we going to do that? Obviously, if you're amenable people, if you're easygoing and you're able to, compromise on things as couples should, then you'll do fine. You'll do better than the people who, again, are stuck in their ways.
Right.
But there can be those challenges that come up.
I would say that a middle ground would be, at the end of the day, a lot of what brings people together are there similarities. But
Right.
when there are some similarities there already, I would say, not to let the differences, provided that they're not on your deal breaker list, not to let those differences stand in the way of meeting someone with whom, those similarities really might already be there.
Right.
Right. And that what Chani said about a deal breaker list. So I think
You
need
should
to-
have one.
Right.
Definitely have one.
And I think that the list should be, I think the list should be a small one. Meaning, I think that you need to find the
Right.
core things that are really like, this can't work. This can't work. I'm not going to be able to respect my wife if she does this or if she's from
Right.
this sort of, I'm not going to be able to come to terms with living this sort of lifestyle. But is it easier to find someone from the exact same background as you? Of course it's easier, but you shouldn't be looking for the easiest possible relationship. You should be looking for, the right person, and the right person might come with certain things. Let's say that there's a girl who's read to you who had, she's beautiful. She has the most incredible personality ever. And you could tell that your personalities are going to click like crazy, but she's Sephardi, so there's certain things that when you go to her parents for Yom Tov, you might have to finagle a little bit on Pesach, figure out how to do the rice thing. But they're willing to work with you. They're not they're not horrible
Right.
people. They recognize and they're going to work with you. They're going to
Right.
they'll have rice separately and make sure that your stuff is.
And his parents eat chametz on Pesach. It's okay.
That's
it's
a different story. But what I'm saying is so that sort of thing, really make sure that's a deal breaker before you write it off.
Right.
Does that have to be a deal breaker? I don't think so. Why should that have to be? It might be, but if you're a huge, if you're so, I don't know, if let's say you're Sephardi and you absolutely must have rice every day of the year, and going to your in-laws who are Ashkenazi, not having rice is going to be absolutely devastating to you. Okay, so then maybe it should be on your deal breaker list. But if not, then is it going to take some figuring out? Is it going to take a little bit of finagling to make it work?
Absolutely.
Sure, but that's like anything else. And if the other person has an incredible personality and really matches up with you, or has the potential, on paper sounds good other than that thing, I would hesitate to say to let that. I would say don't let that be an obstacle unless it's something that you really, really feel strongly like this cannot work.
I would also say, I know we're being very, go out of your comfort zone. The one place where I really would not push that, and I know there's been some disagreement, but I think I mentioned this on the first ever podcast that we were on when we talked about, kind of reflected on our dating experiences.
Newlywed steak.
Yeah, that one. I would say that if you feel like you're in a place where you're actually going to be embarrassed to walk in with someone who's different from you or your family in some way, and you're going to be embarrassed to say, hi, this is my husband or this is my wife, it might objectively be a small petty thing and people might be telling you that, but that's just another place where you got to know yourself. And if you're going to be embarrassed, I know she's wearing a sheitel or she's
See,
not
with my
wearing a
parents,
sheitel.
it's just like bring home a black girl. And then after that, they're like, oh no, it was terrible, horrible. You ruined the family. After that, everybody's okay. Any Jewish girl after that is fine. As long as it's not.
By the way, there
fair
are some
to you.
really great black, from women and men out there. So
That's its own episode.
yeah, that's that.
Yona's family would have been very pleased, or certain family members would have been very pleased if he had brought home a nice Jewish black girl.
Really?
Unfortunately, that was not meant to be.
Right.
I'm not complaining. I got a wonderful, wonderful white woman.
We could have had Yona LeBron Jr. Could have been your child.
Right.
Great basketball
Sounds
player.
racist to me.
Does sound a little racist. Probably is. Yeah, we're going to be off the air within the next couple of days. It's been nice. It's been real knowing you guys. It's been real.
We should have an episode about people from,
generational racism.
different races, different cultures, different, that I think that would be a fascinating thing.
What,
to
like
discuss.
actual dating in the black community, the Muslim community?
No. I'm saying,
Or what
I'm
it's like
saying,
for those people to join the from dating.
Yeah, or
scene.
or someone
for
who's
them.
grown up. A person who, let's say, even there are
Like
there are-
about Chuvas.
Yeah, there are Bali Tshuva. There are people who are from birth, black
Right.
people or Hispanic people. Maybe not as many, but it's a thing, and I think it's a fascinating topic to discuss. It's sort of it's not a hashkafic thing, but it's another area of difference between between the two sides. And like, is that something that that you should be conscious of? Should you care about that? Should you not? I think that's a fascinating discussion. I know that when I in my dating experiences, it was something that meant absolutely nothing to me. Like literally, like if you send me a resume of a girl who's black or Latina or Asian, whatever,
Latin.
Oh, I don't do that. No.
Latin. What is it called?
Latinx.
What does that mean?
That's the new woke term for
instead of Latina or Latino, because that's like
gender language.
classification.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
The Latinx air quotes community does not. They did polls about it, and
Got it.
They do not agree with that term. They think it's the stupidest thing. But anyway,
Can I be Jewish X?
you could be Jewish.
I'm going to be Jewish X.
But pretty much like had I been suggested to someone who was a different skin color or a different race, it would have meant absolutely nothing to me. I would have gladly gone out as long as hashkafically and I'm attracted to them and hashkafically everything's on board. It would have made zero difference to me. I've been suggested girls from I think I was suggested a girl who was Asian or part Asian, and I believe I gave her a yes. Like I didn't go out with her, so she must have given me a no. But like or at the very least, like she was on my list, and it just never happened. But like those things never matter to me. It's a similar sort of topic. It's awful.
Oh yeah, it'll encompass. We have an episode plan like that. That's
nice.
the episode that's gonna take care of like the would you marry into this family episode. Like one of the one of the aunts or uncles married a non-Jew. They have Jewish or the sibling is not off the derech type of thing. That'll come up pretty soon.
Nice.
I wanted to close. We have a couple minutes left before we get to the closing with this question. Something I had in mind. I was thinking about pondering while I was chewing gum and walking the other day. Yeah, doing something very productive, I know. Chewing gum and walking at the same time.
Wow.
I wanted to end off by asking you guys what you think is more important in Shidduchim. If you had to pick one, is it their hashkafa? Is it that they're on the same page hashkafically? Or what is their personality? Are there issues that you foresee with their personality? Because I know my answer.
But I mean,
it's a really tough one.
It is very tough.
I think it's, I think it's tough because, in my opinion, there is no choice.
It's
not a choice. They're both so important that I'm not going to choose one over the other, because that's to say that hashkafa is more important than clicking personality wise. So you marry someone who's exactly the same as you in terms of their hashkafos, but you hate each other. That's not going to work. And marry someone who you really get along with, but who doesn't keep kosher on a more extreme level.
Can I rephrase the question? If the hashkafa, if the personality match is so good, yet they're a little bit off hashkafically, a little bit off. Let's say
not that they view each other's dietary habits as one is actually treif. Like that. That's
no.
hard.
Yeah, no, not that. But and hopefully it's not something that you become resentful of.
I think can work and it does work.
Right. That's probably the idea.
In my opinion, it can work and it does work 100%. I think there are plenty of cases of people who marry someone who's who's a little bit different in that regard, and it's fine. They sort of find a happy medium together.
Right.
Throughout life they sort of grow together in their own. They find what works for them as a couple, and they end up even influencing each other in different ways. So they end up coming to a place where if they look back, 20 years into their marriage, they look back and they're like, we're now our own hashkafa. We are a hashkafa together. I'm not modern Orthodox, and you're not modern yeshivish. We're a melding of the two. We've found a way to make them work,
right,
and build it into our family, and to understand each other, and agree or agree to disagree. You might convince your spouse of something, and they say, over time they end up adopting your views, or you might never convince them, but it's something that just doesn't really matter. So You say like, okay, I believe this, she believes that,
Yeah.
to hate, like we're not going to change each other, and that's fine. We don't need to.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I still think that like the most important thing, after being happily married, but a part of that is just being proud to introduce each other as your spouse. It's not fair to you or to them to not feel 100% proud and confident to say, this is my husband, this is my wife. Aren't they awesome?
Yeah.
That's really sweet. And we're just about to get to our closing after these messages.
Hey guys, this is Yona from the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast. I want to take a moment to tell you about I Like Ike Marketing. I Like Ike Marketing serves all marketing and communication needs, including web design, branding, graphics, Facebook and Instagram ad campaigns, logos, social media, and more. To get the full deets and explore their services, go to likeike.net or call 516-399-1000.
Okay, Chani here. Host Mike has been hijacked from Avery. We're going to be doing our lightning round. A little different than usual. We've got two guys answering the questions because questions will likely be applicable to either guys or girls, but not both. So here we go. Worth a shot or maybe not? The girl wore pants on stage for a school play.
Ooh, so for me, that depends where she's holding now. If she's currently at a place where she would do that again, then definitely not. But if it's something in her past, then worth a shot.
Yeah, and as long as it's not jeans or yoga pants. Actually, maybe scratch that. We're good. I'll say yes.
What if they were knickers? I wore knickers one year.
Wow.
on stage.
Knickers?
Yeah.
Knickers. I don't even know what that is.
They're
Is that what Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz wore?
Like breeches.
Frilly.
Bloomers.
They're like the frilly ones, right?
The puffy
Puffy,
stuff.
yeah.
Like what they used to wear at their knees and then white socks and buckle shoes.
I'll show you a picture at some point.
Don't know. Don't know.
Okay. So what if she has a smartphone?
Definitely worth a shot.
Yeah, because she needs to listen to the podcast. So for sure.
Ooh.
Definitely. Definitely.
Okay. And what if she has pictures of Zac Efron in her room?
That's a little bit weird, but I suppose it's worth a shot. I'd be very curious to hear why. And if she passes the why test, then yeah, we'd go out again. Other than that, yeah, that would be a maybe not.
Oh.
Chani,
Yeah.
do you have something to tell me?
I took the poster down before you came to check out my room.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, Zac Efron, I mean, he was in high school at the time, and she's probably above 18. So she'd have to, at this point, evolve her crush to somebody a little bit older. Hopefully it's the older version of Zac Efron. But, yeah, we don't want her dating somebody or imagining somebody younger than 18. So
Creepy.
Yeah.
probably not.
So what if she went to a co-ed modern day school?
That's worth a shot. Again, depending on where she's holding now. If that's something that's in her past, then absolutely. If it's something that she's still holding by and wants to send her kids to the co-ed modern day school as well, then definitely not.
Right. If the co-ed school, if she can guarantee me she didn't have a boyfriend that she liked better than me, then we're good. And yeah, that's worth a shot. Otherwise, it's over.
All right. So when you're checking her out, you're like trying to get a hold of every single picture you possibly can. You check out Facebook and LinkedIn and every single camp video that she was ever in, and you check out her WhatsApp profile, and there's a picture of her and some Rebbitzin who you find out is her seminary teacher on her profile picture. Worth a shot or maybe not?
That's fine with me. I have no problem with that. She's really close with her seminary teacher. It's worth a shot.
Yes,
On WhatsApp.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of judging by the book by its cover. So I don't think it's for me.
And what if her dad is a nanach? Like a nanach.
So there is a distinction between a nanach and a breslover.
A nanach.
If he's an actual nanach, that I associate with a guy who's really high on stuff and screaming nanach, nachman, nachman, meuman on the top of a van painted with Rabbi Nachman and dancing around. So that might be a bit of a culture shock for me, even more than I can handle. So despite all my things on this episode about giving things a chance, I'd probably say probably not.
Yeah, for me, if she gets along with her father, the Nanach, I don't think it's going to work out. He's too happy for us. Too much joy. I can't get that level. It's just not going to work. But if she and he have a bad relationship, I think we're in. I think it's good. I think it's worth a shot.
Calling all resumes. Okay, so this is actually a thing, believe it or not. What if she only shops at clothing stores that have a hechsher on it?
So weird. That's too much. That is definitely not.
Wow, I don't even go to groceries with a hechsher, so that's probably not a thing. Literally.
Oh, yeah.
So this may be interesting on a date. What if she plans to walk on the other side of the street as you?
Preferable. Yeah, preferable. At times.
Yeah, so this is a very good display of how different Avery and I are. Yeah, definitely not. No way.
Never have to open doors for them, though, because they'll always be like half a block behind you.
Yeah, they'll still expect it somehow. Somehow. You're supposed to call the person at the other store to open it for them, and you didn't do it. You didn't wave her the signal to come to cross. Who knows?
Very creative. Final lightning round question. What if she asks how many hours a day you learn before agreeing to go out with you? Worth a shot or maybe not?
Nope.
She should be there learning with me at a certain point. So we're chavrusa types.
That's part of your vetting
I only
process.
go out with Bravender girls.
Oh.
So we learn Gemara. She'll end up learning with me. So she'll find out. Okay, so this has been another episode of the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast. Thank you guys, for listening. And thank you, Yona and Chani, for coming on. I really appreciate
It's been
it.
a long time.
You guys are great. It has been a long time.
We had a baby in the interim, in case people were wondering why we were away for so long.
Right.
So
yeah.
we kind of took a bit of a hiatus, but we're happy to be back on the show.
Well, after this episode, I hope that baby is wearing its black hat already.
Well, she's a girl, so that'll be her.
Oh, yeah. This girl. Okay, she's got her skirts down to her ankles.
We'll get there.
Covering her hair.
Her legs
At
are
this
very
age.
long, so it's hard.
Yeah.
That is tough. Yeah. I never thought about that. The long legs. Really never thought about that. But this is a great episode. I think we for those of you out there who are, I would put it in terms of hashkafically challenged. You don't know what you are. You don't know what you really want. I think we sort of highlighted some of the main things. Some of the main ideas behind what is important in terms of hashkafa. And one of those
just
things.
the ones that get the most attention.
That too. Yeah, some of the things that get the most attention. But how to navigate, what is actually important to you and keep your relationship afloat while discussing these things, like, TV in the house and whatnot, and secular media. I know for myself what's important. And I think we sort of touched on why certain communities push the ideas of no TV, or, you should watch TV, or, this marriage won't work without a TV because I need something to entertain me and my wife isn't doing it, or my husband isn't doing it. Right? So, any final takeaways, Yona, from you?
I think that, listen, this by no means was a fully all-encompassing conversation. There's so many different layers, and there's so many. Each person has to judge their own specific circumstances and get guidance from the people that they trust on how to approach these issues. But I think that, ultimately, my takeaway is, hashkafa matters. Hashkafic differences do matter. But it's important to be able to define the things that actually matter and the things that maybe are worth trying. I'm not saying to give up on, absolutely not. I think it's very important not to give up on your values and not to give up on your frumkeit. But think about the things that are actually values and that are actually frumkeit, and the things that are kind of side, a little minhag here. Not that minhagim aren't important, but wearing a hat, it's a nice thing that the community does, and that's great. But should it matter so much? Well, you need to look at yourself, and you need to be able to be honest with yourself and be that's what I come back to in general in these conversations. I feel like I've said this on other episodes as well. is just the ability to be open with yourself, to allow yourself to not be so rigid, while at the same time maintaining your values and maintaining the things that are important to you.
Yeah. Know thyself, people. And sometimes what feels like change can really just be getting to know yourself a little better.
Amen.
That's all.
Well, Chani and Yona, thank you guys for coming on. I see you guys have gotten a lot closer since we started. Literally, like our studio is so much smaller, so they're much closer together. I didn't mean that any other way, but no, just kidding around. But thank you guys for coming on. I really appreciate it. Your host, Avery, and this has been another episode of the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast.
Ouchie's Media Network.